Well, hello and welcome to our first review video of what we talked about last night. I know that there were at least 2 women who were missing last night who will be a part of this group, and so we do want to go over a few of the things that we talked about. Now I'm going to cram in about 10 minutes what we talked about for an hour, and so I'm going to go very quickly, but I'll put a lot of the notes online as well. So basically what we talked about was an overview of James, and one of the central themes and one of the central disagreements kind of about James is this issue of whether we believe in works righteousness or faith righteousness. And what that is, James says faith without works is dead. Well, what exactly does that mean for us as Christians? Does that mean that we have to have faith and works? Or does that mean that our works are meaningless without faith? What exactly does that mean? And so we didn't get a ton into that last night, but we will, that is a central theme of James, and so we will eventually get onto that topic as we approach that. I think that that's in chapter 2, and so we'll get to that in a couple more weeks. But one of the reasons that's important to know this is because Martin Luther, who Lutheran Church, all that kind of thing, one of the early reformers, actually threw away James. And so he said James is not a book of the Bible that we should pay any attention to because of this issue of works righteousness. He believed that because it says faith without works is dead, that is going against our fundamental Christian value that if we follow Christ and we have faith in Christ, that's all that's necessary. And so we're going to look at some of those topics, but that background is really important as we start to get into James. One thing that I wanted to bring up from last night, I had said in my last video, the resource video that I just posted, that one of the things I love is to see different translations. And so as we were going through different translations, there was someone who had the New Living Translation in our Bible study. And what this did was it created, I was reading from NRSV last night, and so she pointed out that there were a lot of differences. And one of the differences that we saw was in verse 4, it says, "And let endurance have its full effect so that you may be mature and complete, lacking in nothing." Well, her New Living Translation actually uses the word of, uses this imagery of squirming free. So don't squirm free from things that come your way, but stand firm and stay in those things and have endurance. And we just talked a little bit about what that imagery brings to us. You can see this little kid who's squirming free from his parent instead of listening or instead of obeying his parent. And how often do we do that in times of strife and in times of testing and in times of trials? We try everything that we can to squirm free from those trials instead of just standing firm. And these are things that we'll constantly be talking about in James 1. And so I just wanted to kind of put that out there because I know a lot of people don't use the New Living Translation, and that's just some beautiful imagery that translation uses. We also talked about the difference between trials and temptations, and I actually haven't had a chance to look up the Greek on that yet, but I'll follow up on my notes. My lexicon is back at the office, and so when I go back to the office, I will put those in my notes. But we talked about what a difference between a trial and a temptation might be. So a trial might be something that all of us would consider a trial, something like getting cancer or having a sick child, things like that. Those are trials for every last one of us. But temptations can be our bent to sin, right? And so they can be something that's different for all of us. I have a different set of temptations than maybe you have. And temptations kind of tend to ebb and flow and change as we evolve and that kind of thing. But we all have a different kind of bent to sin. And so we talked about, as we're going through James, where it says trials versus temptations, does that make a difference when we're reading James to know if it's trials or temptations? Does that make a difference in how we read it? When we know that a trial is something that's just hard, it's life things that are just hard on us, whereas a temptation is something that we kind of have to flee from, and we kind of have to just realize what those parts of us are, those human forms of us that are tempted. Jesus was tempted. That's a very human thing, a human interaction that Jesus went through was being tempted. And so, as we're talking about those kinds of things, it's good to know the difference between trials and temptations. Finally, we talked about God and this question of can God be evil, and kind of stumped the crowd last night because no one had really thought about that. Well, if God creates everything, can God create evil? did God create evil, or is evil something that exists without us? And we talked through some of that and talked through what the beliefs. Well, James does tell us that God can't be evil in chapter 2, or in chapter 1, excuse me, verse 12 and 13. It says, "No one, when tempted, should say, 'I'm being tempted by God,' for God cannot be tempted by evil, and he himself tempts no one." And so just this thought of, well, God can't be evil, but God can take a whole lot of our wrath. And so when we're upset about things that are going on in our lives, when we're upset that things aren't quite going our way, or that things are taking more time than we want them to, that God can take all of that wrath and he can take the heat, but he also isn't the one that creates evil. And so understanding that God is there to support you and love you, and he is our rock, and he is the our friend and our confidant and everything for us and to us, but he also can take a lot of our wrath and a lot of how we're upset. And that doesn't mean that he's causing those things, but that means that he's there for us. And so, yeah, that's basically in 10 minutes or less what we talked about last night. I know that this is very short. I'll throw some more notes up there, including the discussion questions. I didn't include the discussion questions on the video, but I'll throw up the discussion questions so that you can think about them for yourself at home and just see what you think about what we talked about last night. And I will, I'll post all that for you. So I'm looking forward to seeing those of you who couldn't be there last night just because of the night that it was in a couple weeks. And those of you who were there, I'll see you in a couple weeks. And those of you who have now decided that you want to take part, I'll see you in a couple weeks. And we will continue on with our discussion of James. Looking forward to it. Bye.